coffee, of course. Espresso. My name is Wolfgang Aigner, and I'm a professor for data visualization and visual analytics at St. Pölten University of Applied Sciences in Austria. So the title of the idea is the data scope, basically, and the starting point for the whole thing is that we literally sit on top of mountains of data. But the goal at the end is not like to accumulate the data and have those huge amounts just for the sake of it. But what we actually want is to get insights from the data, to learn from it, to make decisions. But data per se is invisible to humans, and therefore it's usually difficult to incorporate these data into real-world environments. And this leads actually to this vision of the data scope. And so if you think about, like, similar to how a microscope makes things visible that are too small, or a telescope makes things visible that are too far away, the idea of this data scope is to make data which is otherwise invisible visible for humans in their physical environment. So, I mean, large parts of the data we're actually collecting nowadays are based on sensors, which do measurements. So what they do is measure some aspect of our physical world around us. So things like, for example, air quality, temperature, moisture, and so on. And what we usually do is to look at that data from an office setting, like the one we're talking over right now. So sitting in an office, have a computer and look at the data. The downside of that is that we cannot perceive the data where it's actually measured. So when this temperature or moisture measurements are made, like in your garden or on the street, where the actual measurements are made, you cannot see them. And this has some disadvantages. And the advantage of being able to see the data where it's actually collected is to make it actionable where it actually is and take into account the whole, like, surrounding. And that's the idea around this data scope. The data is collected more or less automatically by sensors. So those sensors are deployed like in the environment, like outside, for example, like distributed over a city or over like some other place. There are different technologies for that. One of them are so-called low power wide area networks, and where the sensors need very low energy and do send packets over larger distances. So they do measurements and send them like every, I don't know, 10 minutes, half an hour, something like that. And that's being sent over that sensor network and then stored, collected at a server where it can then be analyzed, visualized, and used. So basically, it's like small items placed in the physical environment that do automatic measurements, like, for example, something that you probably relate to is a weather station that has a couple sensors in it. It's basically a box that you put outside somewhere, and it takes those measurements and sends them wirelessly over a network to a server where it's collected and managed. What data visualization is, it's about turning data into images to make them understandable for people. And it taps into the power of the human visual perceptual system. So a thing that we humans are very good at to make sense of the visual intake. That's something that's much more developed as a sense than other senses, and so it can be used also for making data more understandable. So making complex data understandable to human beings, help them gain insights, make decisions based on that data. That's basically the goal of data visualization. So turning data into images. The general idea is like pretty versatile. So there are many application domains you can think of. So one example also would be like the more or less the public sector. So think about disaster management or emergency services for once. So things like flood prevention along small rivers, for example, imagine that as a nice application domain. Or also public services and infrastructure. So for example, supporting winter service, if you know like at which roads icing happens or snowfall is there. Or also things that are very important in infrastructure wise, like securing drinking water supply, having measurements along long pipes, for example, that lead to larger cities, or also tourism, like things like air quality. And if you have places where there's particular good air quality, it's also something you might want to show to your guests that come to that place exactly because of that good air quality. Or also making cultural and leisure facilities more accessible, or things like easy things like communal swimming pools and like exposing the water quality there, the water temperature probably helps tourists like deciding where to go for swimming. All these could be interesting sources for data for that. And Datascope, there is a basic project running which is about setting up like the basic technology and trying out first prototypes. And one of the first prototypes that's actually already also employed is inside a larger campus, and the buildings there. You have disinfectant dispensers, and you want to make sure that they are not empty. And the one thing is to really go from one to the other, like the whole day running around that whole area. And the other idea is to use sensors, as we talked about before, that actually measure how full they are, and also what their like battery status of these devices, and then give you information without like opening the whole device, like letting you see inside with kind of a Datascope application on your smartphone, so where you can see what's in there. So that's the one application where it can be already used. And the other one we actually right now working on is more an outside use case with augmented reality or situated visualization, where the idea is you use a smartphone or a tablet and see through it, and you see the data actually overlaid over your real physical environment. And that's actually also where the whole thing should go to really like incorporate the physical environment and give you information where sensors are around you, and also give you the readings of that sensors. In one particular application domain we are working on is also cultural heritage site prevention. So imagine an important cultural heritage sites, and you wanna preserve them, and then you can do like sensors that measure cracks in walls, for example, so that they don't open more, or that moisture isn't finding its way into a building that is important, for example. So, and making them visible to the ones who care for that sites. That's another example. As I mentioned before, that running project is very much focusing on the rural areas, which should lead to what's called smart rural areas. So also using technology there, and especially the usage, the establishment of these low power wide area networks that can compensate for otherwise maybe poorly developed network infrastructure in terms of high-speed internet connectivity, for example. So these sensor networks can be utilized for collecting data, also in areas where the coverage, for example, of the cell phone network is not that great, to use that for gathering data. And that can generate added value for end users, for communities, and also businesses in those areas. And so the focus there is like making technology available also outside these well-developed digital infrastructures. And that's a technology that's very well suited for that, and making that sensor data also usable in the physical environment outside of cities.